Dios le bendiga, mi nombre es Benjamín Zavala y este es su programa Una Milla con Cristo. Vamos a estar aquí todos los lunes a las 7 y queremos que se den sintonía todos los lunes, apoyen este programa. Y en esta noche vamos a estar hablando del matrimonio con dos hombres jóvenes que hablando de diferentes perspectivas de lo que es el matrimonio y diferentes trasfondos de cada uno de nosotros, de donde vinimos. So we're going to be talking about marriage today. We're going to be talking about different perspectives and different backgrounds that we came from, and we're going to get real about things. You know, I think this is a subject that we need to talk about nowadays with the divorce rate the way it is and things like that. It's good to know different perspectives. And a while ago we talked about marriage and motherhood, and now we're going to be talking about marriage from the male perspective. So without further ado, I'm going to present the two men that we're going to be talking to tonight, which is Gabriel Rodriguez, Cheito, as we know him, and Nelson Frankie. So, Cheito, you want to say hi to people?
Hey, how's it going, everyone? God bless everyone. Hopefully this talk right here can edify your life. It definitely is going to edify ours, and let's see how deep we get into this, you know. I believe there's a lot of marriage that needs help. What exactly the problems we might be coming up with today here. So I'm excited for today, and hopefully you guys be blessed by this.
Man, Nelson?
What he says, back it up, you know. Nice to see y'all out there. We're going to get real today.
Hey, man. So before we get, into the topic, I want to know, what your backgrounds are, like where you came from, what examples do you have of marriage and things like that. What was your childhood like and everything that you saw as you grew up? So I'm going to start with you, Cheito.
See, I'm one out of six, all right, kids, you know, so my mom, she was always a housewife, and my dad was a provider, so my dad had to provide for all of us, you know, all 8 people, right? So he was constantly more of a provider, and that's the type of figure I always saw my dad as. And then my mom, I always saw her pretty much, you know, as a housewife or whatever you want to call it, but the example of marriage that I got for them wasn't really, you know, they have their little love spurts in the moment, but the most things that I could remember from my dad, to be honest with you, is pretty much my mom as a slave. You know, my mom was constantly always bring him things, you know, it's just he demanded always a lot from my mom, you know, and I see a woman who's working constantly, a long day, you know, taking care of the kids, cooking, having ready, cleaning the house, having to make sure the clothes are clean, and then, you know, also being, you know, treated like demanding things. So that was a big picture in my life that I saw what marriage was looking like at that time, right? And then I also see my brothers, right, and them too, you know, they didn't know well for themselves, right? So they almost carried that same thing that my dad was doing, you know. So they had the same image in marriage too, just because you saw their marriage, how they're. So, you know, in my mind I had that perspective of, oh, this is what a marriage is supposed to be like. You know, my wife has to do this for me. My wife has to be like this, you know, instead of me, you know, thinking of, oh, like the Disney movies, like they say, right? So that's a little, you know, seeing a little snapshot of what I thought marriage looked like back in the day.
So, Nelson, how was your background? What was your childhood like, and what example do you see of marriage, and if you saw any examples of anything that you could emulate?
So my background was, I was an only child for most of my time. My mom and dad were not together. They probably split up when I was about a year and a half. So I didn't really see an example of marriage. Like I said, I was the only child for most of my time, living with my mom until she had my sister when I was 16. So both of them were providers, got it done. I got everything I could have asked for. And then my dad was married twice, but that should explain it. I didn't really see it because I would go there for the summers. I had 3 siblings over there. Like I said, really didn't see my dad a lot because he would work a lot every time I was there providing. And so I never really got an example of a marriage except through like movies, you know, fairy tale TV shows, stuff like that. But as far as like in my life,
right, you didn't have the experience on it. Yeah. So, you know, because like I came from like quote unquote the perfect family, you know, like mom and dad were in the house. I've never known my parents to not be Christians, and we grew up in church. We always, you know, had that that foundation of the Bible, a foundation of Christianity, a foundation of being in church. But I think the one thing, and we can actually all like agree to and kind of like relate to, is the fact that how old school men saw marriage. Like the way old school men saw marriage was like, hey, I provide. That should show you that I love you. I don't need to tell you. I don't need to show you. I don't need to be affectionate. If I'm providing for you and I'm still here, you're good. We're supposed to be good. So I think, I kind of saw that also growing up, that my dad was like a great provider. Like I can never, like I would always say, man, I wish I could be the provider that my dad was. Like I always saw it that way. So he was a great provider, great man of God, evangelist and everything, but we were lacking the affection in the house. Of like, I'm gonna show you love. I'm gonna be understanding. I want to be patient. I want to be, we kind of lack that. So that was the example that I saw growing up. So I think we can all relate kind of like to the same thing when it comes to that. So now, as you grow up and you start dating, because of course before marriage there has to be dating. Contrary to the way sometimes we grew up in church, like people meet each other and 2 weeks later they're married. Like you have to date first, you have to know the person and all that stuff. So that kind of, all of that affects the way you even date. So, So when you first started dating, what do you see? Like, what do you learn about yourself? Like, man, I need to work on this, or like sometimes we're oblivious to things that we kind of like got from our growing up and the way we were brought up. So Chayito, what do you see when you started dating that this is different?
Yeah, I started expecting people to be like my mom, right? So in my head, you was like, you're always comparing them. Yo, my mom used to do this. Right. And my mom always had his meal ready at a certain time. He had his clothes clean, So I was always comparing, the girlfriend I was with, my spouse, always to my mom. And just to know that, it's different. Like we can't, as much as you want, as your child, you grew up with those customs, and you were so comforted at those times. You expect somebody to be someone, and you really can't. You can't do that, man. You can't do that. So that's one thing I always saw. I always like, my wife had to be like my mom. She has to be like my mom.
Yeah.
All right. If not, she ain't cutting it. Right.
Yeah, and for you it was even more because you were the youngest. At 6, so like you're like the baby.
The nurture, my mom had everything ready for me. She had nice little coffee and everything. Man, I was spoiled when I was younger.
And like you were also spoiled. So now, how did that affect also when you started dating?
So when I started dating, seeing my parents as they were both providers, and both of them.
Right, so that's different, right?
So my mom being a provider also, and her dating life, she was in control. Like the person that she was dating moved with us, and when it was time, they moved out. You know what I'm saying? She had it under control, and the same thing for my dad. Like they didn't need the other person. So me growing up and starting to date, it was like if I provide for myself and you ain't cutting it,
right,
I don't need it. You know what I'm saying?
So
I can do it on my own as well.
You were kind of like detached from the get-go.
Very emotionally unattached.
Right.
I could show signs of it, but when I needed to, like,
it wasn't nothing.
Yeah,
right.
Good. I go do what I need to do, and then we'll be good.
Right.
I rely on myself.
Right. So, and that's the thing. Like, it's crazy how you see when you start dating, you kind of like start seeing like, oh man, I'm like my dad in this. Man, I'm like my mom in this.
True.
Because all of that like flower bringing and all that stuff, I didn't see that. So I was like when they were expecting it from me, I'm like, why? Like,
is it really needed?
Like, why I gotta give you that? Like that does nothing for me. So and that's another thing also, like especially with men, we think that because it does nothing for me, then it shouldn't matter to you. Like if flowers don't do anything for me, why should it matter? Like women like the details and all that stuff. Like,
just because.
Right, like, oh, you don't even have to spend anything expensive. Like, if you bring me just a card, I'm like, why? That you throw it away after a while. Like, why? Like, and because of that perspective from us, it's like, if that don't mean nothing to me, then why should it mean anything to you? And why are you fussing to me about it? So like, do you guys see that also when you started dating?
Oh, definitely. One of the things that was hard for me when I first started dating was, since I always saw my dad being a provider, right, always bringing things to the house, I used to scare to be on dates all the time because I knew I have to pay no matter what.
Right.
And sometimes I was dead broke, sometimes I was like only had like $10 in my pocket, and I know, they wanted to go out, watch a movie or something, and I was just like, oh my God, I gotta pay. I have to pay.
Yeah.
Because it's just the mentality they put that I was accustomed to, right? That my dad had to provide. I gotta make sure, no matter what happens, I could not eat and make sure they eat, So I had that mentality and also it tapped into insecurity too, right?
Oh yeah.
Because if you didn't have none, you just like, man.
And that's the thing. Another thing that a lot of people don't talk about, like that growing up with old school men, the insecurity sometimes that creates when you don't meet those expectations, because when you see your dad being a provider and being this and being like the strong man or whatever, like when you don't measure up to that,
you can't even play for McDonald's.
Right. It kind of creates that insecurity. So how was it for you?
For me, like I said, seeing two providers, the easy part came with like, oh, the person mad, buy some flowers, or the person mad, buy them something.
Yeah.
Where I thought it was like, I bought you something because that was what I liked, you know what I'm saying? If I was sad at home when I was a kid and they bought me something,
we're good.
Yeah, it was like, so, growing up and dating at that time. Now, I have a job at this time. Not middle school, high school, when I was grown up. It was easy for me to buy flowers, but there was no meaning behind it. It was like, all right, yo, I bought you the flowers. Why are you still mad? So that part came easy. It's the emotional part for me that was very hard because of the providing aspect of my parents.
Yeah, because the thing is that from the beginning, like you were saying, your mom was like, hey, I got it, so. All right, we don't like each other anymore, so get out.
Yep.
I'm so good. I'm so good. Right. So I'm so good. So that it makes a lot of sense. Also, that the emotional part wasn't there because everything for you was like either physical, like gifts, like if I'm getting money, then we're good. So that makes a lot of sense. And it's crazy how we don't think about that even when we're dating. We don't think about it like how our upbringing kind of made us who we are, even when we're dating. Like when we're dating, we're like, man, but why is this happening? But it kind of like you have to like step back and kind of see, like, all right, so what was the other person's background? How did they grow up? Exactly. What do they like? What is it? Why is this so important to her? So now, after the dating, and I think the only one that's been with the same person. I always joke around and say that you guys have been together since birth.
Yeah, pretty much.
So
18 years.
I know I'm definitely not married to the person that I dated the first time. So same thing with you. We all go through those phases, and we grow up, we actually know what we want, we understand what that takes. So now, from your perspective, like, you and your wife, Lisi, people from church, we know who she is. Who doesn't, whoever doesn't know, that's Chaito's wife, Lisi. You guys basically grew up together.
Yeah,
so,
man. Yeah, honestly, we had a chance, not like most couples, we had a chance to almost mold each other, right? Because we came from two different backgrounds. Lisi came from a household that was divorced. I came from the household that stood together, So the fact that we came from two different marriages, right, and we saw two different points of view and perspectives, I was always expecting her to be one way, and she was already expecting what was going to happen to me in my way, So I was thinking like how she's supposed to be, and she's already knowing like, all right, I already know what's going to happen at the end of it, because she had that picture of what marriage was. So when we were growing up, it was more like it was almost like a fight, like it was like I was trying to show her what true love was, like, hey, listen, though I saw my parents, they probably was not the best example that sometimes, right? But I saw them always fight, right? But they remained together, you know? They made it work and somehow got there, right? And that's the same vision I had with my marriage, you know, like don't make Lacey fall, this and that. Like, listen, I don't care. We're not breaking this up. We're gonna keep it together because that's what I saw from my marriage, right? And then Lacey saw like, oh, listen, this ain't working, you know. So we might have to call quits because she saw that from her. Right. So it was definitely a learning experience coming from two different marriages, and then most importantly now that we're in, you know, that we're in God together, right, is a whole different perspective. Because now we see both of our outcomes and we're like, oh my God, you know, it wasn't our parents' fault. You know, they just were just doing what they were taught. But now that we have the Bible and we reading the words, you know, and we see what God's done, bro, our perspective is different from what it used to be. Right. Now it's more focused to what we see now in the Bible and see what God has for marriages, you know.
Amen. So how was your experience, right? Because like I said, only me and you dated. Of course, things didn't work out, but then we ended up with the one, you know, because we had to learn in that process. So, how was your experience? How was your transition into now, you know, meeting who your wife is now? And what do you have to learn in all of that process?
So, for me and my wife, we met in high school. We didn't date in high school, but we became best friends in high school. So, the transition to when we started to date was very hard for me because the emotion part. You still my friend, like that's what it is. You know? So it was very hard to separate it, and now we're dating and working on towards getting married. While she, you know, she's a female, so she has more of the emotional side, and she's giving it her all 100%, and I wasn't at the time. And then her background too, like I said, a loving mom, emotional person, and me, I'm not. So it was we're very opposite, and it was very hard because, like I said, I'm the one that's, you upset, I will get you something to make it right, and she's like, I just need you to talk to me. I just need you to show me some emotion. I don't need gifts.
You were just throwing flowers.
I got the flowers. I bought your favorite chocolates. Stuff like that. So it was very hard. But for some reason, like I was telling her the other day, I always wanted to be married. Even without having the example of it, I just always said, I'm going to be a one-woman person, so I want to be married, and I don't want it to fail. I don't know how I ended up getting it. It must have been the movies or something, but I also didn't understand the responsibility of marriage as far as what the Bible says and what God says about it. I didn't understand that. It was just a title at the time for me.
And because also at this time you don't really know anything about the Bible.
No,
you know,
I wasn't involved.
Right. You know, by the time you got married, you were still.
Yeah, I still wasn't involved.
Right. So your transition to becoming a Christian and knowing what the Bible says, it was during marriage, right?
Yes.
So how was that transition then, when you started becoming a Christian and during the marriage, and then knowing what God requires from us in the marriage?
It was tough, man. It was tough because she grew up in church, so she knew a little bit, but like I said, we both wasn't involved like that. But I always believed in God. I always believed in Jesus, but I was Jesus died for our sins and we good. Whatever. It wasn't the biblical way. So when I started to transition, it was very hard because the Bible, God is always asking for us to cry out to Him, pour out to Him. It's emotions. He wants that emotion as well. And I couldn't do it to a physical person. You know what I'm saying? So to do it for God, it was very hard for me. And that was a hard transition because now you got to let go. And now you got to look in the mirror and realize that I'm not perfect, you know what I'm saying? Because I could provide, you know what I'm saying? I'm not perfect. Like, I have a lot of flaws that I didn't realize that could have came from generational curses, could have came from just me just being me, and I had to work on those things. And opening the Bible, reading it, and giving my life to God, that transition started that process. I'm still going through it, but I came a long way from when, you know, I first got married.
Right. So, you know, also, like with you, even though you grew up together with Lisi, but by the way, they're each, you know, they're both married to sisters.
That's my brother-in-law.
Right. So, from when you started dating Lisi, you really wasn't either going to church or anything like that.
Oh, not at all, man. Listen, when I started going to DC, I remember like just going to church for the because I used to go to, of course, my church with my mom, like Catholic church, and we just sitting there like an hour and just get out quickly. But when I went to Lisi's church, man, oh my goodness, like going from Catholic to Pentecostal, man, that's a huge jump, right? So when I walked into church and I'm like, all right, you know, I really like this girl, let me go to church. She invited me to church. I'm here sitting and I started seeing people speaking in tongues and all these things happen. I'm over here like,
what is happening?
This is real. Are these people just going around here like we might have to go, you know, I might have to hug one of these people. But, you know, seeing that and just seeing like that part, right? And then, believe it or not, like, I thank God for blessing me with my wife, Lisi, because she's the one who brought me to the, you know, to be able to have the opportunity to meet Jesus, you know? And even though she wasn't really in church, but she was going in church, you know, because her grandma at that age, man, if it wasn't because we met Christ and actually we wouldn't be together today. Like, hands down. We wouldn't have been, if I didn't make that choice, I know at 15, I would never been, there wouldn't be no marriage right now.
Man, and that's basically what, you know, we want to get into, that at the end of the day, the center of everything is Christ.
Amen.
You know, the center of the marriage is Christ, and if Christ is not in it, you're gambling. You're gambling. You know, so
how do you do it without Christ?
I don't know. How? Because, you know, he's the only one who teaches everything that you have. You have to have in marriage. He's the only one who can teach you that. You know, when you read the word, that's the only way you can find out what I'm supposed to do for marriage. Because if it's up to us and our personalities and what we want, I'm out.
Yeah, man, the number one scripture for me is so hard, right, sometimes, right? Be slow to speak, quick to listen, slow to wrath. Oh my God,
and when you're married as a man, you got to do a lot of listening.
A lot of listening, man.
So that's one thing. And we're being real, you know, because
definitely.
Like from the male perspective, you know, what we see, like I said, we grew up in a generation, you know, that when we saw our dads, they're not emotional people. They're not emotional. Like, I see my dad, like now that he's older, you see them cry more. They get older. But like growing up, I saw my dad cry one time, and that was when his best friend died. That's it. Never saw him cry again. So seeing all of that is like, you know, it kind of creates in me also like, I don't like crying is weakness, you know, like, and I don't want to cry, and even to this day it's hard for me to cry. You know?
Yeah, man, I think one of the things is that as men we're so used to suppressing our emotions.
Yes.
Right, because we think emotions is tied down to our weakness, right? So okay, hey, let's not make me see that because it's gonna show that I'm weak.
And we don't like being vulnerable.
We don't like exactly vulnerable. So sometimes that happens, man. Like even to this day I gotta fight with it, right? Because I'm like, if I don't show my weakness, I'm not really telling my wife who I am, right? My wife wants me to talk to her, wants me to tell her how I'm feeling. If I'm having a rough day or I'm scared of my job, I have to let her know. I have to let that, you know, that fear of me, like, always feel like the man up mentality, right? And me making sure I'm strong, bro. I can show her, like, I got her back and anything happens. But sometimes, like, and the Bible said the woman's there to edify the household.
Right.
Sometimes the words you get from your wife, especially if she's a God-fearing Christian, she could lead you. Sometimes that's what we're meant to be, right? To help one another.
And that's another thing also, that like sometimes we're so consumed by what we have to do, that we don't realize that sometimes you just gotta sit back and let somebody tell you, hey, you gotta go here.
Yeah,
you know?
that's right.
So how do you navigate with that also? Because, you know, like you said, you're not a person who's emotional or anything like that. So what, you know, what took you, or what process are you going through that where you can be more vulnerable, and what helped you get there?
Like I said, my wife is very emotional, so she helped me get there. Her mom, Millie, just, you know, when I met her, she was very loving, took me in like I was her son. I met her a week ago, and I was in the world at the time. You know, I was smoking, I was doing things that she didn't like, you know, God doesn't like, but she, you know, never judged, never did none of that. She took me in, my wife as well, and then, like I said, reading the Bible, understanding Scripture, understanding God's promises and God's words, that He's with you even in the emotional state, you know what I'm saying? And He makes you stronger when you give up those emotions too. It's still hard to this day.
Yeah.
But then also my wife, just when I finally was able to be emotional, her accepting it and not bashing it like when you was in high school or middle school, if you cried, you know, your boys is making fun of you, like stuff like that. And my wife didn't do that. You know what I'm saying? I didn't hear, yo, toughen up. I didn't hear none of that. No, she was very soft with me, very understanding, and, you know, working through that process with me.
Right. And that's another thing that, you know, when you find out when you have a woman of God with you, that you know, she sees you at your weakest moment, and moments that you're vulnerable. But outside of the house, that's the man of the house. Like that's the lead of the house, you know. And she doesn't reveal those things, but at the same time, you feel the comfort in your home to be able to be yourself with her, you know, and be able to just, you know, basically pour your heart out, you know, with her as you do with God, you know. So, and I think as men, that's very important, you know, because like us as men, we go through so much stress, and because it's like built in us already that we gotta provide, we gotta do this, we gotta do that. So we're already stressing ourselves out, and we feel like we can't let go of those things. Like no, you gotta see this persona that I'm strong, and that's not healthy. That's not healthy for you. That's not healthy for your marriage, because, like you said, then your wife doesn't know who you are. You know, so, you know, I think that, you know, it's a good message to bring out there to men, that it's okay to let go. It's okay to just say, you know what, at this point, I'm just gonna say, hey, babe, this is how I feel. This is how I am, and I'm not gonna hide this part from me, because you need to know who I am completely. You know, so to me, what took you to that point, right? Because like I said, we all share the same thing, as like, I wasn't emotional at first, but then little by little, I started like giving that up. So what brought you to that point?
Honestly, we had I don't want to say like a fallout, but we had a pretty bad part in our marriage where we were just work, right? And not really giving each other that time. And we are alone, we're stressing ourselves out, whether it was school and at home or trying to do things at the house. We were already stressing ourselves out, but we weren't communicating. So a lot of stuff has built up. It was just built up, right? So everything that she was doing, even if she meant well, I saw that a negative light. And the same thing that I was doing, she saw. Any little thing that I thought I did bad, whether I could do 100 things good, she saw the bad thing, right? And the same thing goes for her. Everything that she probably did good, I always saw that bad part. And it was because of a lack of communication. We didn't know how each other was feeling, right? So me and my wife, she's a very headstrong woman. She's a, you know, very headstrong. She's almost like me. We don't like to show our feelings. But it was like, we needed to happen. Like God needed to smack us, be like, listen, Jesus was vulnerable at the cross before in Gethsemane, right before he went up to the cross of Calvary. Like he asked God, listen, if you can, you know, pass this cup for me. But if it's part of your will, you know, only if it's part of it. If not, so be it, right?
Right.
Right there, like seeing that vulnerability, that means seeing Jesus just being able to be vulnerable with the Father at that moment. And that's the same vulnerability I had at church. Regardless of who was right in my relationship, whether I was right or my wife was right, in that moment I'm like, I gotta be vulnerable. In order for me to give her that love that Jesus wants me to give to her, or that love that we should be giving our wives, I have to be vulnerable. So I have to open up completely and just confess.
Right.
And then like you said, we're men, we try to guard that up, but me showing her that vulnerability, my wife started respecting me more as a, because then she's like, oh wow, you're not a robot. You're not thinking like this. You actually got emotions. Oh, look, you're thinking that, okay. So they help us, not only that, it help us relate, man. Because she's like, man, okay, you're dealing with that. I'm also dealing with that at work. I'm also trying to do this. So, and that vulnerability created a conversation. And, my wife is my best friend.
Right.
So that created even a closer bond. And it all started, man, believe it or not, it really all started, man, when we started focusing back on who Jesus was in our lives. And I got a quick thing I wanted to show you, right, that I always like to draw out, right? I learned this from somebody, right? So, I forgot who I learned it from, but you're going to see right quick, right? This is, right? I'm going to draw a little triangle real quick, right? And this is, I'm going to put MS for me and W for my wife. So, I looked at this, right? And whenever we're not having God in the picture, right? This is us right here. And you see how far we are towards each other when it's just us without having God in the picture. But as soon as we start putting God first, each and every one of us, as soon as we start putting God close and start focusing our vision on God, the closer we become. And that's exactly what happened in my marriage at that time. The closer we started focusing more on God and more on what He could do for us, the closer I saw my marriage get, and the closer I was able to open up to my wife and just let her know of all my insecurities, let her know of all my, all my discomforts and all that stuff, and it helps, man. Oh my God, it was like a ceiling to the relationship, So.
And man, so I think it's important that these talks to me are very important because men, in general, men were not the cause of marriage problems, but when there is a cause for marriage problems, we don't like to talk about it.
Yeah.
So I think these talks are good because we need to understand that we gotta strip down all the things that we have learned, because I don't care who you are. I don't care who you are with. At the end of the day, one thing that all of us can have in common is that our women need vulnerability.
Yeah.
All of them. I don't care who it is, they need to see who you are for real. Because I think that one thing that happens is that when we're not vulnerable and we start having marriage problems, then our wives can't give us what we want because we're not even expressing what we want.
Yeah.
And then
they're not mind readers either,
Right. And then we start thinking, oh, should I even stay in this marriage? Or we start paying attention, and let's be real, we start paying attention to other things that we shouldn't be paying attention.
Exactly,
we start paying attention to other women. We start paying attention also she got what my wife doesn't have. She's doing what my wife doesn't do. And then you start kind of like going away, like you said, from God, and then you're going away also from your wife.
Yeah.
So I think that one thing that can definitely, if we're having marriage problems, that can save marriages is you expressing yourself so you don't go crazy and then something happens and where did this come from? It's because you're not communicating. You're not telling the truth about what you really feel.
So with that, from jump, because me and my wife were best friends, I told her I'm gonna keep it real with you, from jump.
Yeah.
So I always was big on communication, but I was still wrong in my communication. So I was one that I'll tell you how I feel, but it wasn't in a vulnerable way.
Right.
It was like, I don't like this, and this is why I don't like it. Instead of being like, hey, you made me feel a certain way, and it brought me back to this, or it brings me back to that. It was, you need to stop doing this. I don't like it. That's how I was, and that was wrong, and because it wasn't soft, it wasn't emotional.
Right.
It was like, but to me at the time, I was like, But I'm telling you, I'm being honest with you. I'm telling you, you know. So communication is big, but it's how you deliver it, and I still have to work on it today.
Oh, we all do. We all do.
That was big because a lot of people be like, communication is key, but it's how you deliver it is big too.
Right, that's true. That's so true, man.
Because some people love to talk. I love to talk. But there's a way to go about it.
Exactly.
You know what I'm saying? So I just wanted to.
And one thing also that is very important is that we need to understand that like what the Bible says also is like, you know, sometimes we hold on to this grudges and like, oh, I'm mad at my wife for a long time, not realizing that God is not hearing your prayers.
Yeah.
You know, and the Bible says that if, you know, you need to reconcile with your wife and not God doesn't hear your prayers. Do you understand how big that is?
That's huge, man.
That I don't care what you're saying, I don't care how much you're crying, God is not hearing you if you're not okay with your wife.
Yeah.
That is something that is very important, that and that emphasizes on how important marriage is for God. You know, because at the end of the day, marriage is the foundation of society. You know, and it's also a foundation for our next generation.
Yeah, that's true.
So at the end of the day, God wants us to have communion with our spouses. You know, and as men, we need to stop being so tough. You know, we need to stop being so tough, and I'm not saying don't establish yourself as a man, because let's be real.
So you gotta be the man.
Right, women don't want just somebody who's crying all the time either. You know, so don't be crying all the time either. But at the same time, know when to be vulnerable. It's like, hey, listen, can I? And I heard this from a brother who passed away a couple months ago, Raul Rosario, that he was talking about this, and that he said, listen, there's come points in times for men that you need to sit down with your wife and say, can I talk to you as my best friend? I don't want you to be my wife right now. I want you to be my best friend.
Yeah, you know,
and you gotta express yourself. You gotta express everything that you feel in a loving way. In a loving way. Right. You gotta be wise, because of our backgrounds, we always use that as an excuse, like, oh, but I grew up like that. Oh, my dad's like that, my parents are like that, my brothers are like that. That's how I am.
That was my biggest saying back in the day.
And that's why.
This is me.
Right.
This is who you married.
Exactly. And that's a very wrong thing to do, because we need to evolve at some point. We need to grow, you know, because there's what I always say, that me and my wife been married for 5 years. So my wife, the same person I married is not the same person that she is now, especially as a mother. In 5 years. 5 years from now, she's not going to be the same person that she is today. 10 years from now, she's not going to be the same person that she is from 5 years from now. So like, we're always having to evolve. And the same thing with me. I'm not going to be the same person. You know, my knees are going to hurt more. I'm going to be, I don't know how that's possible, but, you know, I'm going to be different also. And those are things that we have to expect, that we're always going to be changing. We're always going to be having to evolve, and that's also the beauty of marriage. And instead of seeing it as a negative, it's also the beauty that, man, I'm growing up with this person. And 5 years from now I get to know you all over again. Let's do it.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? So, what do you think is a good advice now for men out there? So we're gonna start wrapping it up. A good advice for men out there that probably are struggling, that don't know probably how to communicate, they don't know how to, and even people who are not married and like looking forward to marry somebody. So, what do you think is a good advice?
Some good advice, man, honestly, and it's gonna sound so cliche, man, but I learned that, like, not bringing it back to that, you know, to the drawing that I did, but the more like I understood like who God was and the fear of God, you know, I was able to get certain, you know, it's like the fear of God. You get wisdom, you get the knowledge of who He is. And then also recognizing who God is. And once you recognize who God is in your relationship, it's so easy to treat your wife how she's supposed to be treated. Because you also know that you're also holding that accountability to God, the way you treat your wife. Like, Jesus said to love your wife as he loved the church. And he gave his life for the church, right?
Yes.
So then you like
knowing that some of us that weren't gonna be doing right.
exactly knowing like when they spoke to Hosea, like Hosea who had to be married to a woman who was being unfaithful to him, but he had to love him because he was saying, look, Israel, this is how you are to me.
Yep.
So God told us we have to love, meaning unconditional love. Regardless of who she is, I have to love her.
It's a choice.
And I'm accountable with God about it. But it first starts with me fearing God, knowing who God is, right?
Amen.
Right? So it's like, so now I'm like, okay, God, this is who you gave me this wife. So not only I'm loving her unconditionally, but I know I'm also pleasing God at the same way. So and then another one was to, man, one thing that I had to know, and it was roughly, is like that my testimony, my wife sees it every day. The person who I'm portraying myself to be at church, my wife sees it, right? So I gotta make sure my testimony is validated in her eyes too.
Right.
I can't be up there in church or being up people around them, and then saying I'm, treating everybody with love, but I'm not treating my wife with that love. I can't sit there and my brother do something for me and she sees me forgive the brother, but when she does something to me, I'm going against her, So a lot of times is your walk, who you are. Sometimes we just have to be open, but we have to be that with everyone. And to make sure we have to be focused on who our wife is, right?
Yes.
We also got to make sure we remind ourselves that she's just not a person. She's a partner. She's a person that God put you together to get closer to him.
Amen.
Right? And she's just not a person that's going to do your laundry, clean your clothes, cook for you, or take care of the kids. No. She's your partner. She's just what's going to help you to get closer to God. It's
right.
just it's a covenant, right?
Yeah.
It's a covenant, it's a pact that you make that no matter what happens, you guys are one. So if she's down, you're down.
Yep.
Right? So you always got to, so honestly, my advice is for you guys, man, and it's like I said, it's going to sound cliche again, is, man, if you could honestly get closer to God, because me and my wife wouldn't have been together, I would have never got closer to God, man. That's just plain and simple. If I would have never give God his time, his dedication, and all that, man, my marriage would have been down the road, bro. Completely down the road. Because I knew the way I was holding it up, bro, it was falling to pieces.
Yeah.
But as soon as I gave it up to God and just started focusing more, and then she saw that I was focusing more on God, she knew, like, man, okay, we're working on this. This has to be work. He's trying. And that's the same thing, man. That's what that's my advice for people.
So what would be your advice, right, from your perspective on, the way you grew up and where you are now, and in the process that you're still in, because we all are, in a process. What would be your advice right now?
I got 3 things. So, like Chato said, we got to put God first.
Yes.
Because he's going to help mold us to loving people, loving our wives, everybody on earth. Second, like he said, Christ loved your wife as Christ loved the church. And from my perspective, that means Christ came from his throne, came down, died for us, so we could be forgiven, so we could go to heaven.
Come on, man.
So me as the head of my household, I need to take the power of the throne, take it down, and submit to her. That means being unselfish, being no pride, loving her the way, meeting her needs, because that's also me providing without the money factor. Anybody can make money.
That's true. Come on, man.
And provide that. But do they provide the other things that God provides?
Right.
And then the third is, how important is the win? And what I mean by that is, in an argument, how important is it for you to be right?
Right.
Come on. That's so true right there, man.
Is it for you to be right? Do you want your peace or do you want to be right?
Oh, that one hurt me because, I'm still going through that one, right?
So it's like, back then I always wanted to be right. Mm-hmm. Even when I was wrong, I'm finding a way to be right. And that, it hurts the other person and it hurts you even more because y'all not talking to each other for a couple days, y'all distant, stuff like that. So how important is getting the win compared to being peaceful? Not everything
That's
is
right.
a win.
That's
so
right.
That would be my advice, you know what I'm saying? But
Man.
first, put God first because he helps you with everything else.
and to that, also, I would say it's just an experience that I had one time. You know how many... you know how many couples sometimes, like usually the wife throws the guy out of the bed. Like they're mad, like go sleep on the couch or whatever. You know, I always had the thing like I'm stronger than you and you can't take me out of the bed. But one time she decided I'm gonna sleep on the couch. So I stayed there for a little bit and I was like, nah. I grabbed my pillow and I went to the couch and I'm sleeping with you. and she's like, go to bed. And I'm like, no, I'm sleeping right here with you. And I laid on the couch. She's like, you know what, I'm going to bed. Me too. And then we just sleep together. so to that, it's like, listen, we're going to be, at this point, I know we were mad about something, we argued about something, but this is something that we're going to be talking about later and we're going to laugh about this moment. Yeah. So, and to that is just for me also, like you said, how important it is for you to be peaceful and how important for you is to be right. So at that moment, to me, it was more important to be peaceful than say, okay, I have all the bed to myself. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's something that we all can learn from each other. And I hope it's edified everybody at home. And thank you, Cheito. Thank you, Nelson, for having this time with me tonight and being able to, express all these things that we talked about marriage. I think that this subject can go for 3 hours easily.
It can be easily like 5 parts, man.
So I didn't even know that we went on already for like an hour, but it is an interesting subject, and we're gonna keep talking about these things coming up. Every Monday we're gonna be talking about something different, right? That sometimes the church focuses on so much on spiritual side of things and things about we focus so much on preaching to people and not being vulnerable to people and letting people know that the same struggles that you have, we also have. Yeah. And we want to be open with that, and that's what we want to talk about, these subjects that we're talking about today. So we're going to be continuing to do that every Monday. So I hope you tune in. I hope you can share this. You can talk to somebody about this. Like I said, we're going to be doing this. And, we're going to be doing Spanish. We're going to be doing English. But I hope you continue to support these talks because I think it's important. I think it's something that we can also expand, and not show people that we're just church and that's it. We're also humans. And all the things you go through, we also go through. Yeah. So I hope this edified you. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you next Monday. God bless.